What is going on, guys? Pineapple Sway here. Today I'm going to be talking about my pitch for a Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League sequel. Now, as we all know, I've talked about it before, Rocksteady is working on a Batman game. We have no idea when it'll take place, if it's a new universe or what, but today I'm going to pitch the idea of a Batman game and sort of my idea and what I think could be really good and something that could work realistically after the events of Suicide Squad, since I'm a firm believer that although, there is a lot of hate towards this game, that it will not be, decanonized or retconned in any way. I think Rocksteady is just gonna roll with the punches and just go from there. And this is what I think could be a good sequel to help balance that out so people can forget about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. If you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's get on with today's video. Now, we're going to hop ship just right into this, so just kind of stay with me. Some points that I'm going to set up to sort of build this universe so you guys can imagine it. So obviously we all know at the end of Suicide Squad, the Justice League and the Suicide Squad basically went off to take off and go work and fix on different universes. And they're basically a team now to fix and sort of restore all the damage that Brainiac has done across the multiverse, if you will. However, what we're going to say is, for the sake of our game and our pitch today, a lot has happened in Gotham since Batman has sort of disappeared, because we're going to go with the comic book canon of Kill the Justice League and say that the invasion, Brainiac's invasion, has been going on for 3 months, and that a lot has happened in Gotham. Just a lot of crime and everything that you could think of that is bad has happened in Gotham since Batman was no longer there, since the Demon Bat was no longer there. We'll say that. The Demon Bat disappears and basically everything just sort of gets reversed and undone. So Batman, being, the character he is, the person he is, says that he has to go back to Gotham and that he's going to fix everything that has basically been undone in Gotham, and that the Justice League and the Suicide Squad are going to be responsible for basically fixing and reversing everything that Brainiac has caused. So that's our first point. So, to combat this, Bruce Wayne sort of goes to something that he doesn't understand. He creates Brother Eye. Now, I'll be saving Brother Eye for later, but to give you guys an understanding of where I'm going, basically, Brother Eye is something that Bruce Wayne creates to keep track of all superheroes across, the world. And what not, or what's not the perfect opportunity. All of these superheroes just went evil because of Brainiac's corruption. Now Bruce wants to keep tabs on these heroes to make sure that, hey, something like this never happens again. But unknowingly, he doesn't exactly understand what he's creating. And, I'll get to that later to set up, what I have planned for the payoff. But to give you guys an idea, like what I said, a lot has happened in Gotham. And to give you an idea, basically since Bruce Wayne basically went haywire and a lot of people, weren't big on him, being evil, and that it just kind of, let's say, it ruined his perception of who he is, of his character. So we're going to go with the storyline of, because of that, because of his inconsistency, him being Batman, just a lot of bad looking towards him, and him killing people. We'll just say this, that he, killed some people and whatnot. They, at the board of, of all of his companies, at, Wayne Enterprises, voted him off the board and appointed someone new. And you're probably wondering, well, who did they appoint? We're going to go with Derek Powers to build and set up Blight eventually. Although I don't have any plans for Blight, I think it would be nice to introduce Derek Powers into the Arkhamverse to sort of be a human level threat, but not necessarily a Batman level threat. So either, basically Wayne Industries becomes Wayne Powers Tech, which we all know and love from, Batman Beyond. I won't go more with that story, but that's basically what happened. Is they're like, hey, Bruce, you went AWOL for a few months. We had to appoint someone who could run the company, who understood the company, and, that just makes Bruce Wayne furious. But he understands, too, that his city is basically being torn inside out because of something that has happened, which I will get to. And now, on the human side, or on the more regular life side of things, not necessarily Batman, he has to deal with Derek Powers taking over and absorbing his company, We've seen this before, sort of in The Dark Knight Rises, when I forget the exact character, but Bane crashed the stock market, so Bruce Wayne lost his company. We'll say something like that happened in the events of after Suicide Squad, and with Bruce Wayne, becoming evil and corrupted and basically becoming the Demon Bat. It ruined all of his, good standing and public image that he held. Now, what is causing all this torment and chaos in Gotham? Well, we're going back to the events of Arkham Knight. Ra's al Ghul has returned, but Bruce Wayne slash Batman doesn't know it yet. All he knows is that there's leads that there might be a new Lazarus pit that has been built in Gotham. With the return of Ra's, Batman's going to do whatever he can to basically figure this out and stop this from happening. But it has caused a complete uproar in the city because just crime is running rampant. Ra's al Ghul has basically turned the city upside down. Not necessarily, we will say, through crime, but just, you guys get what I'm trying to say. It's not good to have the League of Shadows in your city. It's just people, are obviously afraid to go out at night, but not because of Batman, but because of the League of Shadows. And because of that, it has caused, an increase in crime, and villains that, knew that Batman was no longer on the table, no longer there, started to arise and, basically pop up. So, moving on. Villains that we would bring into the mix, and obviously, like what I mentioned, we are using Suicide Squad's comic book canon as this. So, Mad Hatter is technically dead, and there's a couple other villains that are dead as well. But I think a big one that we'll throw out there is the Riddler. Obviously, is back. He's returned. He wants to mess with Batman again. Obviously, he found out that he's back in Gotham, and he leaves Metropolis and wants to mess with Batman again. And we're also going to be introducing Maxi Zeus, who's going to be more of a side character that Batman doesn't really necessarily have to deal with, but he's there, and he's a threat that Batman knows about, but doesn't really view him as a threat, since we all know Maxi Zeus is really kind of just a joke, kind of a gag character. And, to throw other villains in the mix, we'll add Clock King, who is going to be a big part of, what I pitched to you guys today when I talk about. He's going to be sort of the secondary villain to Ra's. We're going to have Prometheus, as well as Ragdoll, and then lastly, Talia al Ghul, which I'll get back, to how we introduce her as well, since she technically did die in the Arkham series. Now, like what I said, bringing back Ra's al Ghul, we're going with, this whole plot. How does Ra's al Ghul come back? Basically, he comes back and creates a new Lazarus pit. And we're going to go a little different here and basically say that, he went back to Gotham and created a Lazarus pit. And what he unknowingly did that Bruce Wayne doesn't know about yet is he put Talia in the Lazarus pit to bring her back to life, since he knows that he can use her as a weapon against Batman, since we all know their connection in Arkham City. Now, I also mentioned, Clock King will be a big part of my story. Now, Ra's al Ghul, I'm saving him more for, the final act, the end of our pitch, the end of our game. He's the big threat that Batman has yet to figure out, but he's putting together clues and, seeing that, hey, there's something here that I don't understand yet. But, with Clock King on the rise, he's gonna teach Batman a lot of, about the lesson of, time is valuable and that you don't have much of it. Obviously Clock King wasn't really a big villain in, Batman the Animated Series, but, here I feel like, if this was to become true and Rocksteady was to bring him to life, I feel like he could be a big villain. Now, we will be using Clock King to, to basically kill off, this may get me some hate from you guys, but to kill off a big love interest of Batman, which is why we'll, later on use Talia as a weapon from Ra's al Ghul. Clock King unknowingly, captures Catwoman and uses it against Batman and will ultimately kill her, which will cause Batman to sort of go into a rage. Now, Batman, very confused on how and why Catwoman was even back in Gotham, that is a question we'll save for another day. But that's sort of what leads to Batman just becoming rageful and showing that and seeing that he may, need more than just the demon bat. He needs to go through, other precautions to basically stop evil from happening. So, back to Brother Eye. he just lost Catwoman, and now he's going back to Brother Eye, which we'll say Brother Eye is in its early stages. He still doesn't understand exactly what he's building, what he's creating, but he ramps up, the process of creating this thing that he doesn't understand. He thinks he understands it, but in reality, he doesn't. While in the meantime, he knows that the League and the Suicide Squad are off, in in the multiverse, doing different missions and incursions to help save and restore what Brainiac did. But he's here on Gotham, in this own, personal nightmare that he can't seem to stop. He just basically had to deal with, the Metropolis invasion, the corruption of Brainiac, and he just lost Catwoman, he just lost Selena Kyle, someone that he loves dearly, and now he's dealing with all these different villains that have returned, and he's on sort of this theory that Ra's al Ghul might be back. He just can't prove it yet. So, he finally tells himself enough is enough. He's like, I've created Brother Eye, but he's like, it's time to fully ramp this thing and get it going. Which, unknowingly, he creates the ultimate weapon. Now, like what I said, I will be saving Brother Eye for the end, but Bruce Wayne notices that something has gone horribly wrong with Brother Eye, but he shrugs it off. He has more to deal with. Now, and this is where, I bring in the other characters, that I mentioned, the other villains. And, basically, just like every other Batman game, he's going to stop him. He's going to put him in jail. He's going to lock him up at the GCPD. But, he has another issue. There, like what I mentioned, there's Maxi Zeus. He doesn't really understand, kind of views Maxi Zeus as a, problem. And I would say Maxi Zeus is really our, and, other villains as well are just causing so much havoc in Gotham that, Batman has no other options. Batman is very weak because obviously he just was tortured and almost killed by Brainiac and basically used against his will. He doesn't really have the strength, but he's trying not to be selfish. He doesn't want to get, Nightwing, Robin involved in this mess because this is a mess that he believes he created and that he alone can fix. So we're going to bring back Brother Eye. He has no choice and ultimately creates O.M.A.C. Now, technically, Batman isn't responsible for O.M.A.C, but we're going to be taking a different page and saying that Batman creates O.M.A.C. And obviously, O.M.A.C goes completely haywire, killing all of the villains in Gotham, basically destroying what Batman stands for. And he just takes off. He completely disappears. He kills Maxi Zeus, he kills Prometheus, all the villains I mentioned, Ragdoll, all of them dead. O.M.A.C kills them and basically just disappears. He goes off map, not to be found again. And Batman realizing, hey, this is a problem, but I can't deal with this right now because with the death of those villains, it leads to the rise of the one and only Ra's al Ghul that Batman has to deal with. So this is where, this will basically be the end and conclusion of my story. Batman realizing that Ra's al Ghul's back in Gotham, and not only that, but Talia is as well. So Batman is in a very weak state because obviously he loses Catwoman from Clock King, and now he's basically seeing all of his villains and his city just reach even more of just uncertainty because O.M.A.C is running rampant from something he created in Brother Eye. So basically Batman has a choice. He's understanding that he has to do something that he's never done before, and that is ultimately killing Ra's al Ghul to eliminate the threat for good. Now I know that goes against everything that Batman stands for, but where he is, that leads to him to have no other choice, ultimately killing Ra's al Ghul, but deciding to let Talia al Ghul live. And that would be the conclusion of the story, but don't worry, I have more to set up and to build off of y'all. So, with Ra's al Ghul fully dead, the new Lazarus Pit destroyed, he lets Talia just go off, and he tells her to just never come back to Gotham, that he doesn't want her here, that it's not safe. And realizing Batman, what he just did, killing something that he never wanted to do, that's not what he stands for, he hangs up the cape and the cowl. He understands that his time is done. It's over, that he can no longer be Batman because he can't do it anymore. It's physically and mentally draining him. But he understands too that O.M.A.C is on the loose, which to this will set up 2 future games for me. and what I pitched to you guys today. Batman warns the Suicide Squad and the Justice League that he may have created something worse than Brainiac could ever have done, and that was O.M.A.C. So, the League and the Suicide Squad will eventually return, and that they will have to deal with the threat of O.M.A.C setting up a Justice League game. But to build off Batman hanging up the cape and the cowl, it will lead to a new Batman, a new person to be trained and basically prepped to become the next Batman, which is where we'll be introduced to Terry McGinnis. Now, obviously, we all know that Batman's much older when he gets introduced to Terry McGinnis, while these events, I would say, are only a few months after the events of Kill the Justice League. But like what I mentioned, Batman has no other choice. After killing Ra's al Ghul, he sees himself no longer as Batman, so he gives it up. So we're going to say that Terry McGinnis is already established in this universe, and Batman basically trains him to become the next Batman to fight and help the Justice League. Anyways, though, that concludes my story. This is a pretty long video, but I thought put a lot of time and thought into this. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did sharing it with you guys. I think this would be really cool and a lot different, since when I did my first sequel pitch, I did do Batman Beyond of what I think made sense after the events of Kill the Justice League. But here, we are still keeping the Batman character, but introducing a lot into the universe with the Justice League coming back and the Suicide Squad to defeat O.M.A.C, and then Terry McGinnis basically being prepped to become the next Batman, and Batman, Bruce Wayne, ultimately giving up the cape and the cowl after the events of Kill the Justice League, since, we have to throw in some stakes to make Kill the Justice League somewhat matter. Anyways, though, I hope you guys enjoy this video. This is Pineapple Sway. I will see you guys next time. Let me know what you think and what you think could be a good idea for the next Batman Arkham game. Anyways, though, like what I said, this is Pineapple Sway. Peace out.